We said that these people are supposed to keep people safe and to provide security. And also, secondly, to solve cases in which they are supposed to make discretions, ladies and gentlemen. There are several cases in which they have to decide their own policies, for example, when to keep silent and when to actually do a lot of things, right? Then we see there are a lot of ethnic-related issues, religious issues, gender issues, and domestic violence cases, for example. Firstly, what we have to know, what's the victim satisfied when the case is being administered by the police, right? Secondly, what's the resolution achieved fairly? Thirdly, whether the evidence of the bigger crime is actually there and we do not realize it, ladies and gentlemen. These are the things that is needed to be catched by the surveillance cameras when police are on duty, because right now there is no system which allows us to actually know that further. Before that, no POI, okay. Now, ladies and gentlemen, why is it important? We believe that when the people that are supposed to protect you abuses you or not treating you correctly, then you can't trust them. You can't even report them, because you can't report exactly to the authority that abuses you, right? We said that this is problematic. As a citizen, you also need to be able to be ensured that you're protected to the maximum level, ladies and gentlemen. Citizens have the right to accountability, and right now it doesn't exist after a lot of cases, ladies and gentlemen. We have to ensure fairness and detailed account of what actually happens, whether there are codes, conducts broken, ladies and gentlemen, whether there are higher law enforcers who can actually process these policemen in the very first place, right? So right now, if the qualitative testimony is not enough for you to actually say, hey, I was abused by this policeman, you can actually have a video which records whatever happened whenever they are being abused, ladies and gentlemen. These videos can later be processed by the higher law enforcers. We believe that this is important to ensure crime evidence, right? Secondly, why is public trust important? We believe that public trust is important because when police work day to day to protect you, in the end of the day, people need to be able to cooperate by actually trusting these people in order to be able to obey all the rules and regulations in which they already obliged to you, right, ladies and gentlemen? When people do not want to oblige laws, we say it might result in a lot of bad things. Before that, yes, Deta.
You're aware that a lot of policemen wants to take their job because it requires a judgment feeling, and we think that it might be harmful when you use the camera surveillance.
We believe that police feelings onto whatever they like or whatever they don't like does not appear to be higher rather than what they are supposed to do in their job description, ladies and gentlemen. It is not a matter of whether or not you like what you do. You're already contractually obliged to do so, and therefore it is important for you to really ensure that you do everything fairly. Even if sometimes you do not intend to do things unfairly, sometimes you do not realize there are certain mistakes, certain bias coming personally from you. And this is what we want to be able to assess, right? Now, we believe that what might happen if what a lot of cases already happening in the status quo without the surveillance cameras is that when people do not trust the police, they result in, for example, vigilantism, in which they believe that because police are not fair in doing a lot of cases, we better result to, for example, people, those tattooed guys who seem to be stronger, who can actually fight the thieves, ladies and gentlemen. Those people who actually fight drug dealers by themselves without actually knowing whether it's safe to do so. This results in a lot of victims, more and more victims every day, because normal citizens, they do not really know how to handle law properly, right? They do not really know whether or not how to deal with people when people did mistakes, and so on and so forth. Law supremacy is not there. People just judge by whatever they feel right or wrong, by whatever they tend to support whichever groups is part of them. Whichever groups is not part of them, whichever groups felt to be abusing them, then vigilantism might not be able to assess fairly who's right and who's wrong. We said that this is problematic. Because of those reasons, we believe that we always have to require police officers to wear surveillance cameras while on duty.
I thank the Prime Minister for her speech. I'd like to remind all the debaters that your speech after 7 minutes 20 seconds will not be taken into account by your judges. So please control your time. That would be only going to be fair for all 8 debaters in the round. To open the case for oppositions, I would like to welcome the leader of opposition here.
Ladies and gentlemen, the stance of the opening opposition is that we don't think that it's necessary to oblige police officers to use this surveillance camera when they are on duty. In the opening opposition, we trust the individual judgment of our police officers that currently we have in the police department. What do we concede from the opening government, ladies and gentlemen? We concede that there are problems happening in Ferguson, ladies and gentlemen. But I would like to prove to you why it's an individual disgust that one person, one white police officers having racial disgust to unarmed black teenagers. And it's wrong to offer generalize this identity, this individual disgust to the whole police department. Two things I'm going to bring to you in my speech. Firstly, I'm going to prove to you why there's an exclusive harm in which that when we apply these proposals, meaning that this will enable police officers to take decision in times of crisis. Secondly, I will prove to you which directly engage to the point coming from the opening government why this will confirm the distrust that currently occur within our society. But firstly, let me engage to the case of the opening government. They never explain why the methods that currently we have within the status quo is not enough, ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, we think that in regards of racism problem, no thank you, the police department are currently having a racism detection and a racism-based training in which that you are given a very special case in which that the police department can detect you if you are a racist, because police department will create a special case that kind of like the black people are the one who is criminal, ladies and gentlemen. We think that the case of Ferguson is a glitch in a system in which that an individual are inheriting racist values in their self, ladies and gentlemen. We don't think that currently police department are encouraging their police officers to be racist. Secondly, ladies and gentlemen, we think that after the tragedy occurred in Ferguson, progress is there. This is why we think that status quo is more than enough, because police department right now are more open to the scrutiny coming from the society. And we think that the police department in Ferguson, for example, are more open to accept, for example, black people police officers, ladies and gentlemen, to show that they are able to regard and to appreciate racial difference within their community, ladies and gentlemen. And thirdly, ladies and gentlemen, we think that in order we think that the problem that currently we have, we already can gather the facts, ladies and gentlemen, through CCTVs, including the case in Ferguson, ladies and gentlemen. The problem was that the police department are refusing to disclose the facts, ladies and gentlemen. These problems also can occur within their proposals if the police departments are not being refuted, ladies and gentlemen. That's why we think it's a problem-solution mismatch, because in order for us to disclose the facts which currently can be attained in the current status quo, is to make sure that the police department are want to disclose those facts in the end of the day. No, thank you. No, thank you.
Sorry.
Proceed to my point of argument, ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, police officers will not be able to take decision in times of crisis. Let's characterize what is the duty of police officers, ladies and gentlemen. We think that police officer function as a ranger within their community. They need to call a judgment in times of crisis, ladies and gentlemen, in which that these judgment are an individual judgment which being trained when they are entering the police department, ladies and gentlemen. What you need to understand, the uniqueness of this judgment is that this judgment is situational, ladies and gentlemen, and it has unique characteristics to every judgment that they take regarding the criminal case that they are facing, ladies and gentlemen. No, thank you. That's why, ladies and gentlemen, we think that the police officers should be able to have a full freedom, ladies and gentlemen, and should be able a full trust coming from the police department that their judgment are the most righteous judgment in times of crisis, ladies and gentlemen. For example, if you're a police officer and you are seeing a suspicious black man, ladies and gentlemen, hiding his hands in his pockets, ladies and gentlemen, which already disrupt the presumption of innocence, which bring train to you, ladies and gentlemen, when you are entering the police department, it's important for you, for example, to ask the black man in the first place, ladies and gentlemen. And we think that the existence of the surveillance cameras or distrust the police of calling the judgment that when these judgment are necessary to begin with, ladies and gentlemen. Why this will occur? Because when you're applying this surveillance camera, meaning that there will be a rigid situation, ladies and gentlemen, that the police department disperse to their police officers. That, for example, in a situation, police officers should take an A action, ladies and gentlemen. And we will verify that you take all those action when we see your surveillance camera, ladies and gentlemen. We think this is not right. We think that the situation can change and it's not a rigid situation to begin with, ladies and gentlemen. And we think that the harm would be that people can die when the police officer are not able to have a 100% freedom in take those judgment in the end of the day. Before my second argument,
yes, if your judgment is that good, it shouldn't be a problem for the policeman. Secondly, if even president have strong scrutiny from the media, why can't policemen have the same?
Yeah, all those scrutiny from media also exists within our proposal, ladies and gentlemen. We don't think that we need to have these new proposals to increase the scrutiny coming from media or society. Second argument, why this will further confirm the distrust coming from the society, ladies and gentlemen. What you need to understand is that currently society are not able to trust the police officers, ladies and gentlemen, because back then the case is that the police officers are the one who are not able to take the individual judgment. The problem would be when you force them to use surveillance camera, ladies and gentlemen. Society will see that all police are not able to take individual judgment, ladies and gentlemen, and they need the help coming from this particular technology, ladies and gentlemen, in which we think it's not represent the reality, in which that it's only one police and it's only one glitch in the system, in which that the individual judgment are being clouded by individual disgust to certain race, ladies and gentlemen. This is why we think that this will confirm the distrust coming from the society, ladies and gentlemen. The harm would be society will refuse police as a trusted stakeholders within their community. For example, society will continue protest and will continue disregard the authority of police to protect them, ladies and gentlemen. And secondly, ladies and gentlemen, we think it's also come to small significant things like informing the police about the crime that occur within their community. That's why we think that society need to trust police really well. That's why we think status quo already progressing, and the status quo are concentrating and increasing the ability of police officers to make their individual judgment. In the opening opposition, we prove to you why there is an exclusive harm applying the proposal coming from the government, and we don't think that the opening government is giving an exclusive benefit. Thank you.
Thank the leader of opposition and Deputy Prime Minister, please.
Mr. Speaker, we say that Ferguson is not a glitch in the system. We say this is the manifestation of rage, and we say that this is the manifestation of distrust of society towards police officers, Mr. Speaker. Now, how systematic is this so-called bias? It is so systematic that in stop and search, over than 50% of African American males were the one who were subjected to it. Secondly, for example, in terms of, for example, random searches in airports, a lot of the time, officers were mostly looking at your name and then performing a random search for you. This shows how systematic this bias is, and how a lot of the times there's the police officers has a lot of discretion that they might abuse, Mr. Speaker. Now, opening opposition provided two main arguments in terms of why then police should be trusted. Now, they say that the judgment, we should be able to trust their judgment and we should be able to give them full freedom. Now, here's the thing. We're not particularly sure why suddenly giving them surveillance camera would mean that we're not giving them full freedom. They can still exercise discretion. They can still do their arrest. The next question would be, how do we evaluate those arrests, Mr. Speaker? How do we make sure that they did not inflict any harm? Would the arrest used in violence, or were those violence justified, Mr. Speaker? We think that suddenly saying that we're not going to let them do a need of their power, former power, Makes sense, Mr. Speaker. Now, we do agree that situations, the situations of arrest and discretion are very situational. We agree to that. The problem would be, what are the situations? How did that happen, Mr. Speaker? Now, currently, there are no system that is able to evaluate them, Mr. Speaker. This adds towards the discourse that is happening, whether or not the wife was beating whether other kind of scars, or for example, how did the police ask this victim, and how did he dealt with that? Did he just go away? Did he kind of barely solve the conflict on a day-to-day basis? Did he arrest them or what? We think that these sorts of situations and these sorts of kind of everyday details are something that needs to be exposed towards society, and we think that is a very huge thing that we need to do. Secondly, they say that people would then suddenly distrust authority and that they would then go against authority, Mr. Speaker. Now, here's the thing. When we talk about surveillance camera, when implanted in your, for example, let's just say implanted in your hat or implanted in your uniform, Mr. Speaker, we say that the eye does not go only towards the authority, the eye also goes towards defendants or victims, Mr. Speaker. We think that's exactly how you gain evidence of conduct of the defendants, and we think that is exactly how you kind of watch these sorts of people. Now, we think that these eyes go two-way, and we think that this is the very reflection of society eye. Before I move on towards my constructive, any few eyes.
Why do you think that after the police are doing their duty, they need to give annual report to the police department, and the police department can give a check and balance whether the report contingent to the result of their investigation or duty?
Okay, here's the thing. A lot of times you fill your reports themselves, right? For checks and balances, the other person who would fill your report would be your partner, right, Mr. Speaker? Now, here's the thing. A lot of times with trust is like this, is that when you're in these kinds of hierarchies, the police department have a very vested interest to not look bad in front of the public eye, Mr. Speaker. That means they have a vested interest of shutting down any complaints that happen, of shutting down any signs of abuses that happen. And we think that especially if you're an especially famous cop, we think that there is an even more vested interest by the police department, which is why we say that we cannot only trust these police department's discretion, Mr. Speaker. Now, moving on towards my constructive, I'll be explaining to you how these would then decrease subjectivity within or biases within the law enforcement, and how these are kind of the eye of the society, by saying that this is kind of the eye of society. Now, here's the thing. How exactly would these polices view surveillance camera, Mr. Speaker? They would feel that they are being watched 24/7. Now, what does that tell you? That means that they're aware of their conducts. That means they're aware of everything they say, and that they would then know that any misconduct or any problematic words or any not only criminal conduct, Mr. Speaker, but also breaches of code of conduct. Because when I talk about violations made by the police, we're also talking about incidences like gender bias in terms of interrogating or in terms of helping the victim, Mr. Speaker. Now, when that happens, police, we think, would then be more likely to watch what they're saying, and they're more likely to actually listen to what their training has been doing to them, Mr. Speaker. They would know that, for example, asking a rape victim how that rape felt was something that would be scrutinized a lot by the media, Mr. Speaker. And then we would also have data on how much does the police do that, on how many times did that, how many times did a police officer ask a question, and how many times did they dismiss a case, and how did they dismiss the case, on what grounds, Mr. Speaker. Now, we think that would then lead to a lot of things, right, Mr. Speaker. We think that would then lead to processing of whether or not they would look good, whether or not this would go in. This would how they would write the report, Mr. Speaker. Because then, when you talk about writing a report, you would need to write facts that are also consistent with the facts within the surveillance camera, which are actually facts of the crime, the crime or facts of the arrest, Mr. Speaker. Now, what then would happen? What then would happen, Mr. Speaker? We think that we would have a 24/7 eye not only in the victims. We think that we'll also have 24/7 eyes surveillance cameras in places that are not always open, but yet prone to police violence. For example, in police convict violence, where there are a lot of sexual crimes done towards the convicts by the police, or there are a lot of violence, human rights violence done by them. Because when we talk about convicts, and convicts are in a lower situation compared to the authority. If you want human rights safety and human rights fulfillment, side with proposition.
Thank the Deputy Prime Minister, and to close our House, I'd like to welcome the Deputy Leader of Office.
Ladies and gentlemen, we think that it is important in this debate to really characterize the nature of every police department and how does their job really takes place, and how everything necessary for them to conduct their job in order to really maintain the security for the society. We think that what is most important to be discussed when we talk about the characterization of police is that we think the judgment that they have is necessary to be kept free from the society judgment, which might be very sensitive, because the judgment that comes from this particular police officer might be translated into a very sensitive issue within the society, and that's what creates unnecessary pressure towards the police officer, and that's what makes us believe that the freedom will be taken away for this police officer to conduct their job. And that's exactly the stance that the opening opposition takes in this debate. But let me deal with the case brought by the OG, right? Because the only benefit that they cater in this is that it will create an evidence, and in the end of the day solve the problem that they want to have. But here's the thing, ladies and gentlemen. We think when they depict the situation inside of the police department is as broke as they depict, like how police department, the report will not be read because, you know, they have vested interest to maintain the security. What will make them think that they will release the video as full as it is if it will when it might be also harm the credibility of police officer if the paradigm is as broken as what they want in OG. But we don't think that the police officers we have in status quo is as harmful, because even in the United States, even in so many other developed nations, we think that this police officer has conducted so many mechanisms in order to minimize the racial disgust that we have inside society. For example, when you want to have police on duty, you don't only have one police on duty in one car, you have two police on duty. It is to minimize the possibility of subjective feeling toward and subjective judgment, ladies and gentlemen. You are ought to have you are ought to have report on your personal basis. All of those are in order to minimize the judgment and to really make sure that you are a qualified officer to begin with. You are trained not 1 year, not 2 years, but continuously, ladies and gentlemen. You have additional training every month, and they watch your performance. They take comments from so many people, and we think that there are check and balances currently happening. We concede that it might not be perfect, but we think that the current status quo is enough to maintain the importance of the evidence that they want to have in status quo. But most importantly, we think the glitch that happened in Ferguson cases is not as big as how they depict it. We regret the case in Ferguson, but up until now, we think even the police officer agreed that they might have bad police officers, and they concede to that, and they, in the end of the day, fired that police officer and punished them. We think that shows to you how police officer is not a police institution, is not as harmful as they depict. No, thank you. But the second benefit that they brought in this debate, right, on how it will minimize the abuse in investigation, like for example, domestic violence or rape cases. We think when we talk about investigation, it's a whole different story, right? Because when we talk about investigation, we record the investigation. That minimizes the possibility of abuse during investigation. So their proposal is unnecessary. But we think what is additional evidence that they want to have by their proposal. Because we think that the police officers, when they want to have, when they attack a person, when they confront a person, then we think that the evidence is enough from the other mate that they have, from the other society that exists in that area. We think that it is not unnecessary to have the evidence that they want. Yes.
Why are you okay with records on investigation, but you're not okay with records on arrest?
Here's the thing, because in record and investigation, you need to make sure that the witness that give you investigation will always consistent with their witness or report and so on and so forth. So that's the main reason. All right, now here's the thing. They think that it is important. The second thing that they brought to this table on how they say that transparency is very important when we talk about law enforcement, right? But they never really explain what is the ideal transparency that they want to take to have in this table, right? Because in the opening government, they want everyone to know everything about police department. But that's not the case when we talk about the state, right? Because transparency is always adjustable depending on the nature of the job. Like, for example, presidents, they're not allowed to open every discussion that they have with other presidents from other states, because it might also include some sensitive information and in which might not be able to be adjusted and considered by the society as a whole. No, thank you. CIA and secret services, they are not obliged to have report like every year and so on and so forth. They only have like a periodical report, like for example in 10 years, and I think that it is justified because of what? The nature of their job is very sensitive. They need to have like so many judgments, and I think that it is exactly what we have to characterize and put on attention. But secondly, I'm going to respond why police have different nature in conduct, right? Because it is situational, the thing the situation that they are facing, right? We think when you force them to be open to public, we think it is going to be harmful because they are forced to follow the one-on-one handbook that they want to have. For example, show badge, ask to hands up and shooting. But sometimes things doesn't go exactly how the handbook tells them, ladies and gentlemen. No. Like random checking. We think that random checking, if what they have a problem is random checking, let's ban random checking. But sometimes random checking is necessary, right? But they might be scared when they have to do random checking with the surveillance camera, because if they do check blackmail, it might translate into a sensitive issue to society, right? Society might always think when you random check a blackmail, then that means you are racist. But that might not always be the case. We think because it is a sensitive information, and the judgment of society might not, judgment of a police might not be able to comprehend holistically by society. We don't think that we need to go with their proposal, because that judgment should always be independent. That judgment, the idea of police enforcement is they have to be separated from society. They have to be separated from the government, because they need to really follow the law enforcement and the law and constitution, and they have to protect all of those things. They need to be free from any pressure alongside, and we also think that the pressure from society is unnecessary for us to have. But the last thing that we need to have in this debate is on the idea of whether or not it's going to create a better trust from the society, right? Because we think that the society trust is necessary for police officer in conducting their job, because the society, the cooperation from society might be very important for the police officers to conduct their job, right? For example, they want to have random check, for example, or so many other things. We need the cooperation from society. But we think when we violate the ability for police officers to conduct their judgment, we think it's going to be very harmful, because the society might not be able to, the society might think that, here, you are bad, you have a bad mistake, and that's the reason why we don't think that you deserve to tell us what to do. And we think that society judgment is not as easy as what they think. We think society judgment should not be confirmed by having our proposal. That's the reason why we think transparency is unnecessary, and we don't think additional benefit that they said is exclusive coming from them. We oppose.
I think the Deputy Leader of Opposition and opening the lower house today, I'd like to welcome Member of Government from UMEC.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Speaker, the contribution from the closing government will be two. First of all, I would like to talk about how our policy can actually reinforce the check and balance between the civilians as well as the police. And secondly, I will also talk about what is the role of the police, and I will also give you more contextualization about why when the police have make their individual judgment and exercise their individual judgment by action, how can we actually maximize the level of accountability? Before I move on, there are several rebuttals. First of all, they talk about, well, the police have received training. We do not deny that, Mr. Speaker. But first of all, they never explain to us why the kind of training will be effective. They just assume, well, training will be effective, given the fact that we have already observed the police abuse, given the fact that we have already observed the cases where the police do not actually fulfill their responsibility. But secondly, even if we say that the kind of training is effective, right, but it is not the debate about, Mr. Speaker. We think that it is about how we can actually increase the efficiency, how we can actually make sure that the police will ultimately become accountable for their wrongdoings that they have done in on their duty. But second of all, they also mentioned, well, we can actually undermine the role of the police by proposing our policy. Their logic is simply that the police, when they have gun, the people will think that they are weak. We don't think it is reasonable at all. And they also say that, well, when the police have the camera in their hand, they will actually have some kind of additional things that will become a barrier that prevent them from exercising their power and whatnot. But what we are going to say is, firstly, we think that it is necessary, and secondly, they are also contradicting themselves, right? Because if you think that the kind of training is that effective, we think that the kind of training will also include how are you going to use weapons in the situation where you will wear your camera, right? So we think that they are actually contradicting themselves, and we don't see the logic why it will hinder them from exercising their duty later. But third of all, they talk about, well, police doesn't need public scrutiny. It is absurd, Mr. Speaker. We think the police is the individual who will need the public scrutiny the most. It is because what they are doing is directly related to people's daily life, and it is somehow directly related to the life and death of the individuals, Mr. Speaker. So that's why we think when police they kill a particular person wrongly, we think that we have to make sure that the police will receive the enough punishment because of their wrongdoing. And we think that having the camera in their hand, it's a kind of way to facilitate that process. But more than that, they talk about, well, the abuse issue, like saying, like, well, when they are going to be attacked and they will provide evidence in their status quo, but the evidence is somehow a written report, right? So we think that it's not effective at all, because what you are going to write, actually it leaves a lot of room for you to imagine, Mr. Speaker. It leaves room for imagination, right? So that's why we think that when you have a camera, the image that you have extracted is the most factual and is the most effective in terms of reflecting the kind of reality that is happening. Before I move on, yes.
We don't use camera on combat force, although they are very prone to kill civilians, because the nature of their job requires freedom to have their judgment being done. How do you respond to that?
Well, we don't see when the soldiers, when they are bearing cameras, we are ultimately, well, it will do harms in terms of how, like, we are going to prevent them from doing that, right? So following our appearance principle, we still agree that the soldiers may actually bear cameras. Why it's so problematic, Mr. Speaker? But more than that, the contextualization, how we can actually reinforce the check and balance. Because when you talk about the police, when they are on duty, sometimes they have to deal with the very messy situation. For example, like occupying Central, right? For example, like protesting, right? So so sometimes you have to encounter a situation, you have to make a judgment which position is going to like act first, right? It's going to use violence first, right? And we think that when we propose this policy, it actually facilitates this process, right? Because when you have the cameras, you also have the evidences based on the reality. Then you can also make a judgment, make a very accurate judgment about who will do violence to the civilians first. So that's why we think at this very point, at this very messy situation like protest, it can actually increase the accountability between the civilians as well as the police. But more than that, our opening half have already talked about the reason, the problem about the racism, right? Sometimes police do not protect them, or sometimes police will just assume that African American will automatically become the criminals in that situation. We'll give you an example about the Michael Browns in the United States of America, right? We say that actually in the public discourse, it is still very controversial about Michael act first or the police use violence first, right? We think the discourse is very controversial. Because when we propose our paradigm, this problem will no longer exist at all. Because when you have a camera above your head, actually, the people can actually make a very accurate judgment about, is it that Michael do violence first or the police do violence first? But secondly, what is the role of the police, right? We think that, well, in this besides the point about like the police have to protect their civilians, we also think that the police have the responsibility to gain evidences to detect the crimes from happening, right? Why we think that it can actually facilitate the problem? Again, it is because when police are on duty, they're actually in a situation where there are a lot of people and the situation are somehow like messy, right? Sometimes even if the police can actually witness the crime to some extent, but we have to acknowledge the very fact that there are some loopholes because the police are still human beings. They only have a very limited vision, right? So that's why we think that we need the camera to actually facilitate the problem, because there are some situations that when the police cannot actually witness by their eyes, they can also capture and record. They can also record it and replay it over and over again in order to find some strategic issues about the crimes. So what we have contributed to this debate today. Firstly, we have already made a differentiation about the verbal description or other means in comparison to the images that the cameras have extracted, which is the most effective in terms of like reflecting the reality. And I have also give you more contextualizations why the police somehow cannot make a good judgment, and when they make a false judgment, how we can actually increase accountability. For all of these reasons, very proud to propose.
Thank the member of government and welcome member of opposition to extend the debate on behalf of Tokyo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We think that privacy is, of course, important, but the closing opposition believe that social order complies not only the police power, but also the citizens' cooperation or citizens' obedience. On this house, we think that surveillance disincentivizes citizens to follow the rule or cooperate with the police or to have the testimony or so forth. We don't think this policy just facilitates citizens not to obey with the rule of the society or have the attitude of civil disobedience. That's why we are standing on our positions. So I have two rebuttals. I have many rebuttals to the entire government case, and then moving on to my extension. So firstly, the government side say that harassment is very problematic, such as the white policeman actually beating a black guy or so forth, or that racism or ethnic tension does exist and harassment is problematic. One, in the context of the very racist society, we think that minority people have already take some measures, such as in United States, where the segregation is very severe, 90% black taxi driver have its own driving recorder. So we don't necessarily mean that sort of police surveillance is necessary in the first place. Moreover, too, we don't think the problem of the entire of the government case assumption is that they can take the very action of that sort of scene, because we are not talking about the emergency case or so forth. They can take some videos only after the police has just arrived. We are still dubious that the result is so desirable in the first place. Two, the closing option side said we can create a very accurate judges. One, we don't think in the first place there might be someone who has a smartphone and taking a picture of who are taking a record or so forth. We don't think this is not necessarily true. And two, we don't think later please. We don't think I told you that it is unnecessary in the first place. But two, there are some assumptions that surveillance is always objective versus objective. We cut the premise because the surveillance angle actually varies owing to the position of the surveillance in the first place. We don't think they rely too much on that very one objective objective data and totally negate the very testimony, 100 testimony or so by just one surveillance. We don't think this is rather problematic. And the third, the entire government case, the problem is that they never answer why always is necessary, why always having is necessary, because we say we have to balance out the privacy and privacy and the security, and this is nicely to my first point. Later please. So moving on to my first point.
Before you move on.
No, thank you. So moving on to my first point. We think, so my first point is how the relation should be between the police and the citizen. But because we think the government duty is to secure every citizen, but also the privacy is also important, because the citizens, if the privacy is so negated, citizens has to fear that they are always watched by an autocratic government, or they are always watched by someone, and they cannot secure their mental security. That is a precise reason why when police record, the power balance is secure, such as a warrant is warranted by the tribunal, it's necessary, or the judgment should be determined not only by police but only the tribunal or so on. We think the power imbalance that we can record and we can infringe each individual only when we can guarantee the balance between the individual and the big power to secure the balance between security and privacy. Yes, sir.
In our paradigm, we still do not deny the very fact that the police needs warrants in order to search your home. But the point is, when the police are going to be on duty on the public sphere, how are you going to deal with
that? Okay, that is I'm going to talk it later. By always having the surveillance makes people feel uneasy and disincentivize to witness what they are thinking in the first place. But I'm moving back to my first point. So why is this so problematic? Because I told you the privacy is, I know, very invisible and it's hard to measure, but it is fundamental right. It's very fundamental right to be free from someone's, control without someone's control. Because if they have a feeling that someone is watching me, they feel uncomfortable and they are fearful, and this is the government has to take. So moving on to my second point, on their paradigm, how citizens would react when their privacy is going to be undermined, and this is the answer to the previous to the closing government POI. So let's start. No, thank you. So we think that automated surveillance facilitates civil disobedience. Why is that so? Because by and large, when citizens cooperate, is that one, they have by and large, citizens have a sense of justice, such as to cooperate, to comply with the law, or cooperate with the police, or having many testimony when they see a criminal scene. But they also have a mind that they want to be involved, or they want to be involved in unnecessary crime or unnecessary very dangerous scene. On that paradigm, we can guarantee And that balancing act, why is it so? Because on that paradigm, the police is approaching in a very casual way and asking, have you ever seen that crime or so forth? If citizens yes, the police will ask which direction that criminal ran away or so forth. So as a consequence, because of that very casual manner, as the citizens are willing to reveal their information, and as a consequence, the police can get a lot of information, and because the police is very professional, they can compare and they can calculate what is the best information, what is not true. But on their paradigm, the problem is the witness lose incentive because on their paradigm, more than 100, police have a very heavy instrument, and they are always recording what they are saying in every second. So they feel they are recorded. And the problem is, the thing is that the witness memory is not that fresh. They are uncertain what they are talking about. The problem is, so on that sense, if citizens say the wrong thing or a dubious thing, that thing is recorded. So as a consequence, they are fearing of such as the false charge, or even if it is the false charge, they are fearing of going to the police for the next time. And as a consequence, the citizens have an incentive to reject every testimony. We think this is very problematic because the information is not going to be revealed. So that is why privacy should be respected for both for individual, for the society's benefit. Thank you very much.
In member of opposition, I'd like to welcome Government Whip to close the government.
Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, both sides agree that there is a role of a police to exercise legislative laws and to facilitate judiciary process. Police is an entity that's going to that's of a function and never going to be eradicated in society. The question here is how to facilitate that kind of cooperation among police and civilians, and how to establish the confidence of citizens to police, which is the executive power that the public is most likely to relate themselves to. So in my speech, I'm going to deal with three things. Firstly, let's have a principle clash directly to closing opposition. When can privacy be compromised, and why security is more important? Secondly, let's also deal with something happening in opening, which is about is police an accountable entity to the public, or do public has the power to scrutinize police and whatsoever? Thirdly, let's also compare the practical benefits of whether having this surveillance camera and so on and so forth, right? On the first idea about security and privacy, we really doubt CEO's stance, because they are talking about the thing that they justify this is not necessary because there is driver, recorder, there is CCTV and whatsoever. These are happening in status quo. That's why police don't need civilians. We think at the first place, this already justify when can privacy be compromised when you're having such things in order to facilitate the evidence collection process and the judiciary process. And also, secondly, we talk about they also justify warrant because, oh, it is issued by the tribunal court, it is issued by the judiciary whatsoever, it is justified. We think this is not a comparable analogy, and we think surveillance camera is of two functions. It is not only the prime function of this kind of surveillance camera is not to scrutinize the public or not to invade your privacy, like your private sphere. It is more of a function on the police behalf, how you exercise your executive power and how you arrest people and collect evidence, whether this is proportional to the cost and whether it's proportional to the result and whatsoever, right? We also think in terms of security, there is always justification for a government in terms of emergency. Government can have curfew, government can have whatsoever in order to protect you from the potential harm that you may probably face. We think in this situation, it also happens when and on the third layer, you have to realize that this video, this recording is not always going to be disclosed. And we think the only potential possibility for you to disclose is when there is a very controversial idea and where there is very problematic ongoing in the public, such as the case of microbrown brought by my partner, right? We think moreover, the thing that is going to be disclosed is not directly related to a lot of majority and whatsoever. We think here, in such case, privacy can be compromised as long as you can establish that, re-establish that kind of confidence I'm going to talk about in my further substantive. Secondly, on the idea of whether police needs to be accountable to the public, opening opposition comes up with a very cute idea of oh, because this information is really sensitive, it shouldn't be disclosed to the public, and police should be free from public scrutiny and whatsoever. We think the current status quo, when you're exercising democracy and whatsoever, check and balance always exists, and you always scrutinize and using media to scrutinize executive power and presidential policy and whatsoever. We also think police here is an entity that check and balance must exist for two reasons that they have brought you. Firstly, this is the only entity that most majority of people can relate to, because police, the only thing that they do is nothing really that sensitive and nothing that is really that complex public cannot comprehend. This is the only thing that public can really relate to for majority of people, because this is about the exercise of power onto me. And this is the thing that public can really relate to. We think public deserve a right to scrutinize the police, and police should be accountable. And secondly, we also talk about police here's of a function which is immediate security and stability of this country. We think police, hold on a moment. Police here also determine death or life in certain occasion, and we think police is of a very high authority, and the part of the exercise of power lies on the police, because no matter how judiciary or legislature input the law or whatsoever, police, you're the one to execute that law, and you should be the one who is most accountable to the public. Before I move on, opening.
We agree that police needs to be transparent to society, but what kind of transparency and why can it not be adjusted to the very nature of that particular occupation?
When we are seeing sometimes when cases such as microbrown, this is not only the thing that happened in a private sphere. We think it exposes to a public sphere of how police should treat black people and how equality should be instituted in that case. We think in such occasion, it is not only about a case, but it's about a large majority and how you resolve the problem of multiculturalism and diversity. We think in such cases, it deserves you to disclose that kind of information or sensitive information whatsoever in order to for better social mutual tolerance and whatsoever, because only by such means can public understand why a police doing that and whether it is proportional, right? And thirdly, let's move on to a practical analysis and whatsoever. We think opening governments have already talked about how it facilitates the evidence collection process, arresting process, check and balance whatsoever. Opening opposition accuses us by saying that, oh, some situations are critical, some situations the judgment depends and whatsoever. We think on the first layer, police, they're already having intense training to ensure that they're making decision in a very right place. And secondly, we also talk about, they have never explained to us how this camera, surveillance camera, is going to hinder your decision-making process and how this little device can really hinder you from making that critical process. And more precisely, Mr. Speaker, we think it is such critical process when you decided whether to take your gun and shoot the person. This is where you need to explain to the public, and only by that device can you justify your action, whether it is proportional and whatsoever. It is precisely those violence caused by the police that needs to be explained and needs to be explained to the public, because this is controversial, right? We also tell you this has a practical benefit of public discourse. When you're seeing the case of microbrown, if the surveillance camera is there, when the recording of whole process is there, it leads to a public discourse on how how these black people are being treated and whatsoever. Because what you're seeing in the status quo is that public are antagonizing the police and they are on a different ground. We think that only this civilians divide can make them to be more in a more moderate ground, which allow negotiation and public discourse. We think closing government is the one that like contextualize this debate in the role of police, to extend it to like also to extend it to like police role also includes public discourse and how you facilitate mutual tolerance. We're proud to vote. Thank you.
Thank government would close the whole debate as well from opposition vote, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So before summarizing this debate, let me clarify the stance of the opposition. So we are okay with this investigation, where there are only the, in terms of investigation, where only the one police and one supposed criminal is in the one room, because there is severe power imbalance and there is a possibility of abusing, right? My partner already told you that it is consistent opposition stand that we are okay with this recording in terms of this investigation. And second case is, we are also okay with this okay with like investigation or like just a recording when it comes to like correcting like the evidence from the house or house of the criminal, or like just a report, just to take a recording or like what the demonstration is actually occurring. It is the same as surveillance camera. In addition to that, we are happy with like just a recording, right? But the burden that governments have to answer is why they have to always, for example, patrolling at night or just when in days are standing at the police station. Why in every single cases policemen automatically have to record even when just having a talk with just the people standing before you, or just before just talking with the people who are like just like walking in front of you. Why in every single cases they have to do this kind of thing? So I know, thank you. Based on this, I have two things to talk about. So first, how the relation between the police and citizens should be, and second of all, why how the efficiency uniquely go down, especially when the cooperation is important, as the closing government already admitted. But before that, okay, first engagement to the opening government. So what the opening government tried to secure is the first in the cases of harassment based on race or ethnicity or gender, and the second case that they tried to support the security issues, they somewhat they lead to vigilantism or that kind of thing. First case is in terms of harassment. They tried to say that testimony was enough. It was not enough in the current situation. But first, we clearly told that when in their cases where power imbalance, such as a young female rape victim, is to talk to by the police, we are already happy with the recording, right? But in the second case, in the ordinary cases, we don't know what kind of incentive the police actually have when it is not the actively the obvious crime or obvious harassment. What kind of incentive that the police actually have to reveal this kind of information or reveal this kind of video, right? Because they already conceded when it is, we have to balance out the privacy and security. The police is not actually revealing every single information they actually get it, right? Because if you reveal this kind of information, someone the crime maybe another criminal may run away, or these kind of severe security problem might occur. In this case, we don't think that ordinary cases why the police have incentive to reveal these kind of information. Second cases, no, thank you. They talked about the media will reveal these kind of information and all that kind of thing. But first, they already mentioned that these kind of information is revealed only to victims. So what kind of extent did the police actually reveal these cases, these kind of people, or to say this kind of thing or that kind of thing? Secondly, even if the people and what they told secondly, or that they can people with the kind of the video, people can successfully evaluate the criteria of like what is like what constitutes harassment or that kind of thing. But first, we know thank you. It is already like based on the context or whether no like obvious criteria or objective criteria existing. We don't necessarily see the why just because the existence of like these kind of surveillance camera can like the one-sided view can successfully like evaluate what constitutes harassment or what in what case it is a harassment, right? We don't think there is no exclusive benefit coming from the side. No, thank you. Secondly, they talked about security problem, but like we are already happy with the surveillance camera is even existing in our partner, which means that even the police, it is not the case that every single like where the crime happened, police always there. These kind of cases never happen. When that is the case, what is the mutual exclusive benefit coming from the police is actually wearing every single like the spot the police actually there. We are happy. We think that even in our part, still a surveillance camera, especially when the crime is high or like a shop or inside the elevator, we don't think exclusive benefit coming from the other side. That's why we don't think that there's a vigilantism somehow like suddenly happen, like just increase the police or train the police. How like the camera will uniquely save these kind of people. We don't see any mechanism of how the people will record, how these kind of information is used, and how they can actually stop the vigilantism, right? No, thank you. But nextly, like engagement to the closing government. They talked about the accurate judgment is important. First, like this, for example, they come up and said about the like the cases of demonstration. But in our cases, the police will also go there. Police will also like the spokesman also like the take like a video camera, right? And some people will record using video, right? But another option coming from their side of the house, because like what police record is absolute or 100% objective, right? Because even though like police record, like it is only like one-sided when the demonstration is so violent, but the police is actually doing so violent thing. But before that, if there's a demonstration, like the police is doing so violent thing, and but if that happens, it is not. You cannot never say that one-sided view is like just obvious that you cannot say like what kind of camera can like how 100% do opening.
Now, if the protest is that violent, it would show in the record. It would mean that their action is justified. How would you explain
like
that?
First, like there is not like the uniquely benefit coming from the other side of stuff, because already in our program still like camera we do. Ultimate like summary, how the relationship between police and citizens should be. We clearly told you there is a balancing up between security and privacy. That's why the surveillance camera is okay, but only when it is dangerous, these kind of things will actually work, right? In this case, we never think that the police privacy violation should be always occur, because according to your logic, they have to like put the surveillance camera every single house inside the house or every single like corner of the street, right? That's why we clearly told you when the security issue is so important, it comes to your own like mind or how you feel will be like directly violated. In this case, we never think that these kind of things maybe is allowed to occur. So that what they facially see will go down, because especially police are the actor to spot the violence. Like when you are asked at night, just in case, like what are you doing? If like people feel that like if there is a camera that is recording you, and you know how you have no idea how you are perceived just by the camera, you have more incentive not to say, because it is safer for you not to say anything if you're recorded and you just like just like interpret in a different way. You think that more incentive, because like impact is the information, the fundamental part of an investigation. Even the opening opposition want to protect that the judgment basis is based on the assumption that the information is properly collected. That's why partner uniquely analyze why this kind of security is really important, at the same time balancing out, and why this kind of information is uniquely deprived in our problem. That's a extreme part of post. Thanks.
Okay, all the debaters, please cross the floor, shake hands, and then wait for the announcement of result later on in the briefing call. I will ask all the audience to be here as well. Please stay here long.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh my God, we watch on cameras.